He's a super spreader.
Your cash, your house, your phone, your life, your cash, your house, your life. We want your soul.
Oh, I think we're live.
We're live?
I do think so.
Hold on. I was at the so-called Freedom Rally today, and I think... Oh, God. No, I'm fine.
Corona! Okay, before you cough a lung out, I gotta do my sponsor, alright?
Alright.
Hello everyone, it's me, Mitch Murphy, the Redpill Rapper on thoughtcrimes.ca. Welcome back to another episode of the Redpill Rapper Show. First, I gotta tell you about my sponsor, and that is The Resistance. If you want to look cool, you want to get a cool alpha male hat like your stiff-wristed boy, Badman Redpill over here, just email theresistance144 at protonmail.com and get your stuff, man. Also, Miss Fortune Cookie by David Kopp, our mutual friend. He's selling the best, funniest, most delicious chocolate-dipped Miss Fortune cookies known to mankind. Go to missfortunecookie.ca and ask either of those people, have you heard of the Red Pill Rapper, and you will receive a discount off whatever you're buying. Who are you, man? Who are you?
Who am I? That's a complicated question. Keith McIntyre, business owner.
Mm-hmm.
Father of 2 teen boys. Freedom fighter. Hater of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And next Saturday might be the leader of the BC Libertarian Party if they so choose to vote for me.
Is it next Saturday, for real?
Next Saturday, yeah.
Holy smokes, man.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just gotta make sure that our levels are okay. We're looking good.
Looking good? Well, you're looking good. I don't know. How's my hair?
It's good, man. It's
All right.
good. It's good. Yeah, I do think that shirt's a little early, though. May 4th is a few days away, right?
Yeah, it's coming up, but I think the Stormtrooper shirt is perfect because also the Emergency Act's going to get invoked and we're going to have our own Stormtroopers in the streets before long.
Yeah?
Looking forward to that.
Do you think that's gonna happen?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, you have always been like, calm me down. I'm like, the lizards are coming for us, and you're like, no, the government just sucks. But
Well, if they can get away with it, and really, like, every government just, like, they work on popularity.
Right.
And if they feel like they can get away with calling the Emergency Act, like, they test it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oregon tested it in November. We want to restrict interprovincial travel.
Right.
Ford is doing it now where he's like, oh yeah, we're going to do quarantines between provinces, so they're testing the waters, and they're doing polling, and they're seeing if they can get away with calling in the military on us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem like that's a weird progression. Did you ever see that leaked document that laid out how the pandemic was going to go? Did you ever see that thing? Pretty accurate, man. I brushed that thing off. I thought that's crazy.
Well, I know, I did too when I saw that. I was like, no, that's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Like, somebody faked this, and none of this makes sense. But every single thing in that thing has happened so far, and one of the next steps is military intervention. And it's frightening. And actually, somebody today at the Freedom Rally pointed something out that I hadn't thought of, because I actually saw it as a sign of hope that the police are pushing back. Police in Ontario pushed back. They're saying, like, no, we're not going to set up the roadblocks, and police in BC are kind of saying the same thing. But what if that's part of the plan, where the police say, hey, we're not going to do this, and then the government says, hey, hold on, the police aren't listening to us, time to invoke the Emergency Act.
Yeah, that's something. I was talking to somebody who's like a pretty high-level business guy, and he's been kind of keeping his nose out of everything but keeping an eye on it, and he like calls me up going, hey, what's going on? and I basically said, okay, at this point, because he called me talking about the Ontario police backing down and Ford going, oh, okay, we went too far.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, at this, I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I can tell you at this, they're at the breaking point for the RCMP, so that means they either back down or it's UN troops. That was kind of my interpretation of it. Do you think that's accurate? Like, that it's kind of got to go either way?
Yeah, I don't know. Everything is so kind of confusing right now.
Mm-hmm.
UN troops, I don't really see.
Good.
I think we're gonna we'll get our local troops going, and people will love it. Just like they love quarantine hotels, they love. They're loving vaccine passports of all things. I actually did an article today. Came out in the Georgia Strait about vaccine passports, and the government just tries to find a wedge. They try to find this little bit where they can, they can't take all of your freedom away at once.
Right.
They can take a little bit at a time. Once they've got that little bit, well, then they can just continue to expand that out. It's like a cancer.
100%. Well, yeah, you can't boil a frog. You can't just throw it into boiling water, right? You gotta like ease the people into it, and that is super effective. I'm like shocked at how effective that is, because we were talking about the vaccine passport in the first 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and they all said we're crazy. And now for being against all this stuff, we're crazy.
Yeah,
it's fascinating, man. Like the cognitive dissonance.
The marketing and the manipulation, it's been going on for years. We've been conditioned to it. And like I've been saying lately, like I think what it is the government, they're playing poker. They've been playing poker for a long time, playing the long game. They've suddenly got a royal flush. They're going all in. And they're like, we're going to take all your freedom away right now. Now's our chance. Trudeau loves a dictatorship. He's on record. He likes dictatorships.
Well, the real mess is that everybody's convinced it's the government's job to keep us safe from this virus. They want daddy government to take the virus away. And if that is your belief, then of course you need the military. Of course you need checkpoints. Of course you need all these quarantine hotels and stuff. And that's what's scary about it, is that like there's this default assumption that the government has to fix it.
Yeah. Well, and we've been conditioned that our whole lives. Like where did it become the government is our parent?
Right.
And the government takes care of us. Like we can actually do a better job than the government can. And like it's been happening for decades, and we actually have taken away our accountability as human beings. Right? Like take the homeless situation, the homeless shelter situation in Penticton, and they're like, oh, well, the government's got to spend all this money. Well, why is that? Right? We defer our responsibility to the government, and they continue to do a bad job. Like, look at, like, the divisive politics has been going on for decades, but we continue to think that if we elect somebody different, something different's going to happen.
Right.
And it never does. Because the government and the bureaucracy is the problem. It's not the politicians. It's the entire system.
Yeah, but the politicians gives us a face to hate, right?
Yeah.
Like I've noticed that's like a real thing. Is that one of the most effective like mass persuasion tools is by giving people an outlet to hate. It's like the general public. It's like you should hate the anti-masker, and for us, it's you should hate the maskers, or you should hate the politician, or whoever, because it's almost like everybody has a certain amount of hate ready to go, and if they just direct it in the correct direction, it can work for them.
Yeah, we need an enemy, right? It's why, I like watching hockey. I used to be obsessed with it, but it's like professional sports, right? Like you got to have your team, and you're going to die by this team, and you have an enemy. Yeah. And us as humans, we like to have an enemy. And the Freedom Rally is a good example of that, where the government has created an enemy.
Right.
They didn't need to do a mask mandate. Everyone was wearing them anyway. But as soon as they did that, well, now there's an enemy. Well, it's those anti-maskers. That's why this virus isn't stopping.
Right.
That's not why it's not stopping. It's a fuck.
Yeah. Well, yeah, okay, because I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, because I know, like, the Libertarians, I think, are trying to steer away from the science argument, which I think is that's why I love them. But I do want to ask you some stuff, because something that's been really dawning on me recently is that, because when I started going to these rallies, I assumed it probably is a deadly virus, but it's liberty or death. So I'm going to go out and do this. And like I remember hugging people in those early days, and it was like desperation. It was like we would hug each other, and it was like, I'm going to stay human. I don't care what the cost is, you know.
Yeah.
But here we are, like coming up on a year and a half later, and I have done everything you're not supposed to do. I've been going to these rallies constantly, and traveling. I've been going to Vancouver. I've been going all over the place, and not to mention, but that's all outdoors. But then there's the illegal church, where we're all stuffed in a tube inside. We're hugging, we're singing, we're doing these things, and there's in every one of these places, there's old people, Down syndrome people, immunocompromised people, and not one person has gotten sick. And I'm trying to rectify it in my brain. Like, does that just mean that this whole thing is fake? What does this mean?
I don't think it's fake. There is some randomness to a virus, and like that, that is what it is. And I think though that it's not a very dangerous virus. Like, it is a dangerous virus to a certain segment of the population, and I'm not going to deny that. But the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And, you know, as you know, like, I used to write pandemic simulation software for the US CDC. I'm like completely knowledgeable on all areas of pandemic planning, and like, this is completely wacky. And I remember when the thing first started, and I'm afraid of pandemics. When H1N1 happened, I was like, shit, Mexico is not reporting correctly, and it's probably more fatal, and I'm going to stock up.
Right.
And again, the incompetence of the government. And when this thing came on, I was like, I actually, because they shut down, my businesses suddenly went into a tailspin, and I was in panic mode, and I didn't have time to really look at the data.
Right.
If I had looked at the data, well, it's a bunch of, like, the average age is 85. And I'm an 87-year-old grandmother. I don't want her to die. But people die.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why we've gotten to this place in society where we're so afraid of death. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine last night who he got called 911 for not wearing a mask in a laundromat.
Whoa. Okay.
And he said, like, there's a risk to human life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I might die tomorrow.
Yeah.
Oh, well. Like, what? Where is it written that we all have to feel safe all the time?
Yep.
We're not safe. We drive on the highway every day.
Mm-hmm.
We're not safe.
Yeah, man. Well, and it's really sad because I'm starting to hear more stories similar to the one I'm about to say, where I know somebody that had a relative that was in rough shape, in and out of the hospital, like prior to COVID, just having a bad time, and this person said, I'm not going to go visit them for fear of spreading the virus.
Mm-hmm.
This person has since died, and they didn't see them for over a year,
Mm-hmm.
and they didn't see really much of anybody in that last year of their life, and they're dead anyway, not from COVID.
Yeah.
And to me, that is like the saddest thing ever. For fear of killing them from a virus, they let them die in isolation. You know?
Yeah, I remember when one of my grandfathers died. He was in hospice, and at the time I didn't understand that he was going to die. And myself and my kids, we had colds, and we went to visit him. But I didn't give him a hug. Because I was like, well, I can't get him sick, because if I give him this cold, he will die.
Right.
Well, he died a few days later, and, like...
Yeah.
You know, a hug wouldn't have harmed him at that point. And yeah, it's sad. Like I've heard just countless stories of, well, yeah, I remember somebody justifying. They're like, yeah, I lost 4 relatives in the last year. I didn't see them, but it was worth it because I'm doing my part and I'm going to stop this virus.
Wow, man.
Like what kind of psychosis?
Yeah.
Is that?
It's absolutely delusional. I can't wrap my head around it. But I think it's just like there's these narratives that are so pervasive. Like they believe that that's virtuous. You know what I mean? And it's really hard at this point now, because at that point you either need to like look at what you did and face it, or double down on the nonsense. You know what I mean? And wear 2 masks, like literally double down.
Yeah, and it gets in people's heads, right? Like it's, you know, I have a relative and you know, a mild accident happened later that was sort of unexpected, and she said, well, damn, like what if I transmitted COVID? And I said, it doesn't matter, because you all knew
Mm-hmm.
COVID exists. You all consciously chose to be together. You consciously accepted that risk, and if it happened, it's nobody's fault.
Right.
But that's the world that we're in now, is that everyone's like, well, I can't take the chance, because if I killed my grandma, well, I'm not going to be able to live with myself. Well,
Right.
Like we're living in this constant state of fear.
Yeah. 100%. It's really sad, man. It's really sad to see people buy into it, and it's the people at especially the secular rallies. The people at those ones are so fascinating, because these are people that have just been previously red-pilled. Like they know what the media is, and they don't. Mm-hmm. The default assumption is if it's coming through the black mirror, it's not true.
Right.
And there's a certain kind of person that has seen that before all this, but now it's like the TV is telling you that you're selfish for visiting your grandparents in the last year of your life, and they throw these words around. Like one of the main health officials, I remember after a big rally in Vancouver, said after everybody gets their V words, then these people can go back to their narcissistic, self-indulgent ways, is what this guy said. And this is like an unelected health official that is in charge of our lives. Like, why are you calling... What? Like, if I went into my doctor's office and he started calling me names like that, I'd find a new doctor. Like, what are you...
Well, I posted on my personal Facebook page, I posted a picture of... you can get vitamin B12 and vitamin D in a spray now. And,
right.
Like, it absorbs way better. And I just said... since I started supplementing with vitamin D and vitamin B12, I rarely get sick. And one of Kelowna's top cancer doctors, who I thought would have blocked me by now,
Right.
he commented, he's like, well, don't you think that's from the social distancing and the masking? And I said, well, no, because I started taking those supplements 9 years ago.
Whoa. Okay.
Right? And if someone in the medical profession at that high level is so indoctrinated by that, and then I asked him, like, I didn't want to get in a big conversation. I respect the guy, like, he's
Sure.
and but I said, okay, well, let's bring it down to one very, very simple question. So on the CDC website, it lists that people under the age of 20, 0 to 19, the fatality rate is 20 per million infections.
Oh.
So
Okay.
that means 1 million kids can get sick and only 20 of them die. And I'll submit, probably, tragically, those 20 would have died of something anyway.
Right.
Like 20 out of 1 million is essentially statistically zero, which people don't like when I say that, when I equate lives to statistics. But,
Right. But it's relevant.
But it is, and I'm like, okay, so can you justify vaccinating children with that death rate? Oh, well, yeah, it's going to protect other people. But doesn't the vaccine protect the other people? Right? And so it's kind of like a lot of the climate change arguments where, well, the planet's warming up. That's climate change. Oh, no, it's cooling down. That's climate change. There's a hurricane. There isn't a hurricane. That's climate change. And so you got an argument where, like, you can't. They've got the indoctrination so well done that you can't actually argue it, and they're practiced at it, right? Like, they're really good at it.
Well, it's like real thought crime.
Yeah.
Till like, you commit a real thought crime if you start questioning it. But I wanted to get back to a little bit like your experience with the CDC, because I've like explained to people what you did, but I get the sense that I might even misunderstand exactly what it was you were doing with those guys. Like, can you lay out your experience with that?
I'm gonna need to pop another anarchist.
Yeah.
Amber Ale. Cannery Brewing is amazing.
Badass.
Anarchy is not what people think. Like, the government took that over too. Like, anarchy is just no government.
Right.
And they trick people into thinking that it's a violent thing. It's not actually violent.
They spun that one up, eh?
Anyways, off topic. Yeah, like what I did with the US CDC through another company was I built and developed pandemic simulators from scratch. I had to read all the documentation. I simulated thousands and thousands of virus, and it was like a GIS map based.
Sorry, just making sure we're live.
Yeah, that happened to me in my last one. Talking live for 5 minutes.
Yeah, I got a little paranoid there.
three times. Anyway, so I had to develop the algorithms from scratch, talking with CDC scientists. I read all the pandemic plans, and I was a young guy and I was excited, so I'm like, yeah, I want to do a good job. And I remember a couple of things. I was like, did I do this right? 1 million people died. And they're like, no, yeah, you did that right.
Okay.
Oh shit. like a certain level of virus can be really scary. But what that did, and me testing literally thousands of different scenarios of viruses, like, I'm a data guy, I'm a trend guy, and it just solidified this in my head, and it gives me this kind of intuitive knowledge of the data and what's going on. It also gives me an understanding of case numbers, case fatality rates, all these things. And cases, part of the things that we built was communication. And what they said is, like, in a new virus, you report cases every day because you want to see the trends. You want to see if certain states are happening, things are going. But after a certain period of time, it doesn't make sense anymore. And you should report it like weekly or monthly. And
Sure.
And cases at the beginning is different depending on the amount of testing, as we've seen here. And it's essentially meaningless. But we've been reporting it every single day for over a year.
Yeah.
And people are watching that religiously, and they're like, oh my god, are the cases going down today? Cases went down today, oh my god. And it's meaningless.
Yeah.
And case fatality rate too, like, everybody quotes that. They're like, oh, it's a 5% case fatality rate. Yeah, but that's dependent on the number of cases that are actually detected. And a very serious contagious disease that actually makes most people sick, that's a really important number. When you got something like COVID, where probably 70 to 80% of the people that get it don't get sick.
Yeah.
They're not going to get tested, and then the case fatality rate doesn't actually mean anything.
Yeah.
The actual case fatality rate, it's bad for people over 80, but also so is everything.
Right.
But as you get down below 60, it ends up becoming the actual fatality rate on the CDC website. Look up scenario 5. It's all right there. It starts to get down to 0.0003%.
Right.
And
which is insane.
And part of the thing that we had to develop on there was intervention. So interventions are things like mask mandates, closing schools, roadblocks, these kind of things. So I actually had to simulate that, and I remember having to draw on the map, and they would do these kind of regional restrictions because you don't do them across an entire province the size of BC with variant population density. But even then, they're like, no, closing schools is a very, very last resort. And with H1N1, I'm like, well, I'm going to be okay until they start closing schools.
Sure.
But when they close schools with this one, I'm like, it doesn't make sense. It was just a weird sort of overreaction, and I can go full on into there is a global conspiracy, and I do believe that. I think at a local level, it's probably just a high level of incompetence.
And fear, probably, right?
Yeah, it's helicopter parenting, right? Like I say with Saint Henry. She has sainthood. Like, she actually can't say anything wrong.
Right.
Like, she's been sainted. I don't even know how that happened. Good marketing. Actually, I know her marketing consultant.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I met her. We made out once. She's very talented.
Keith, you can't say that.
But she like the company she worked at, she billed out $600 an hour. And so she worked for companies like Staples, and so the marketing is really, really good, which I understand why you need that. But when the marketing is so good, you're not allowing the human population to actually think for themselves, right? Like you're pushing this marketing, and that's where some of this dissonance comes from, because people like you and me were like, I don't like marketing. Right.
Yeah. It's like a default pushback as soon as you see that kind of thing. Yeah, and that's been like a line that I've found hits home really hard when I'm yelling at people in traffic. Is I'll go, what kind of a pandemic has marketing budgets? And because really, why would we need that? And that's the big one. Is I think they just sold us on this problem by putting dots on the floor, masks on the face, and just the constant fear propagating.
Horgan is advertising in Alberta. He's spending our tax dollars advertising to Albertans, don't come.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
It must work, though.
Oh, it does work. Like, even this last bullshit with the police roadblocks.
Right.
It's completely unenforceable. And even the minister said they can't force you to sit, like, you don't have to show paperwork about where you're going or why. So all you have to do is have a story. I'm going somewhere essential. Yep. But it worked. Like, even some libertarians I know, they're like, oh, I'm canceling my summer vacation because I can't take the chance of getting a fine, right? And it's fear and coercion. Right. I'm a parent. I have 2 teenage boys. I have never used fear and coercion on them. I use understanding and learning, and I let them make their own mistakes. Right. But the government has so many levels of fear and coercion techniques, and people love it, right? Like Alberta, well, BC is the same. ICBC collects the fine. Alberta just said the other day, well, if you don't pay your COVID fines, you don't get to use government services or get your driver's license renewed. Really? Yeah.
Wow, because no one's paying them.
Yeah.
That's sick, man. That is so sick.
It is sick. And so imagine if you're a parent and you use these techniques on your kid. Right? Imagine the damage and the trauma and the horribleness you're causing to these children. Yep. And that's what's happening to our population. And so at the beginning of the pandemic, we all got thrown into a collective trauma.
Absolutely.
All at the same time across the entire globe. We got told this is really, really serious. And I actually got scared at the start because it actually felt like Dr. Henry didn't understand modeling. And I'm like, shit, if this is really bad, we're really in trouble because she doesn't know what she's talking about. And then she disappeared for a few days and she came back and she actually understood modeling. Modeling is actually kind of funny. Like, it's not an exact science.
Okay.
Very, very subtle changes in the numbers. And like, how can you model human behavior, right? Like, you can't model human behavior. It's all variables and numbers. And so, but I saw, she's like, yeah, actually, she understands modeling a little bit. But what happened was they started bombarding everybody on social media. Like, here's what an exponential curve is. Here's what's going to happen. Here's case fatality rates. Here's thing. And then suddenly, because nobody could leave their house.
Right.
Everybody became an expert. And now they're all experts. And it's really interesting because all, like, social media is a cesspool right now.
Oh, it's a wasteland.
You can't have any cognitive conversation on there, but like I'll say, like, they're like, oh yeah, what are your credentials? And they're like, well, here's what I did with the CDC and here's why I know. Wow, you're not a virologist, you're not a doctor, you're not a
What I love about that, though, is like, why the fuck would a virologist be in charge of structuring our entire society? You know what I mean? Like, I get it that they understand the virus the best, but they don't understand mental health. They don't understand the economy. And people go, "Oh, you're so selfish. You care about the economy over lives." It's like, no, there's a direct link between suicide and economics. You know what I mean? And there's all these factors. Why would somebody who just has this tunnel vision be in charge of everything?
Well, people hear the words cost-benefit analysis, and what they think of cost, they think is dollars.
Right. Okay.
It's not dollars. It's actually, it's about human life. And after our last talk, I actually looked at this study a little bit closer, and SFU evaluated the loss of human life over the last in 2020. And so what they're saying is and I think they went a little bit light on this. Let's say 10 months of lockdowns that we had last year. We lost 2 months, on average, every Canadian, we lost 2 months of quality of life.
Right.
So we lost 6.3 million years of life.
Wow.
In Canada.
Wow, man.
And then it goes to say, well, how many lives did we save? And if you go with the worst case scenario of the worst amount of people that could have died last year if we did nothing, the lockdowns took away almost 4 times more years of life than the virus could. And if you go by doing an actual strategic approach and taking care of this properly, I think it's about 286 times worse are the lockdowns. It took 286 more years of life away from us.
Oh, who did that study?
SFU.
Wow, man.
Yeah, look it up. Like,
I will.
I will. And the math checks out, and it makes sense. And I think they're light. Like, how much? There are so many people that in the last year, they have had zero quality of life. They're glued to their TV. They're waiting. They're yelling at the anti-maskers on Facebook.
Oh yeah.
I had a friend of mine. And actually I don't block people very often. I blocked him on my personal page.
I know who you're talking about.
And then he started attacking my political page, and it was
really?
harassment. And there was like 20 to 30 comments on there, and I blocked him on there.
Yeah.
And then he emailed my company website that my employees get.
Really?
And saying that this guy is not for freedom, and I feel bad for the guy because he's following every restriction. He's not seeing his kids who are 10 blocks away. He's not seeing his grandkids. He's like, I'm just going to do my part until it's done, and it's caused a psychosis.
Yeah.
Like this is not normal.
Well, yeah, man. I mean, I like to laugh at health expert Heather across the street and the rest of these guys. It's good, like, comic relief, but the reality is actually quite sad of these people. Like, there's this one guy. It's not Diaper Dave. It's a different guy who's over there a lot. And, sorry, Dave, if you're listening. But
see the one with the giant Q-tip?
No. This is one of he's one of the health experts across the street who stands there with his mask and he's mad at us.
The anti-maskers.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. But I go across the street there. I was just getting some stuff from my car after doing like a performance at one of the rallies, and this guy like through his mask. He goes, "Hey," I go, "Yeah," and he goes, "You suck and your music sucks." And this is like a 50-year-old man, like standing over there, and I just go, "You know what, man? I don't hate you, and like I hope you find peace one day." And he didn't know what to say, but it's because it like. I do just have pity for somebody like that, you know, that he's standing outside with his mask and just throw it. And this guy, he holds up a sign too that says white supremacy is not welcome here. These people are so broken, man. They're so just broken inside that they have to like, we have to be this boogeyman. And I think it's like you say, it's like they're following all the rules and they hate us because we're the super spreaders, right? We're the ones causing the problem.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's not actually, because there's very few people that are actually following all the rules.
Right.
Like actually, one of my crazy communist aunts, she has since blocked me. I just try to have reasoned conversation with her, but if and I hate using some of these terms. I don't like to use the words left and right, but she's full on that woke left virtuous side of things, and she's like, you're gonna regret all the things that you're saying and that you're doing, and she's helping take care of my 87-year-old grandma.
Okay.
And in the heat of it, she was having people come into her home to do coffee tasting.
What?
She has a coffee shop, coffee roastery, and she was bringing people into her home. One of those people tested positive. And you're blaming people going outdoors doing the protest when you brought somebody into your home when you're trying to protect an 87-year-old woman.
Wow, man.
And that's where they don't see, right? Like they're on the side of virtue, and they know they're on the side of virtue, and that's we're really getting into a dangerous state where I'm on this political side, therefore I am virtuous, and then they don't see the things that they're doing that are causing the problems. And you know, the same family, the husband said to his stepson one time, he's like, "Oh, a Kenny man is not a real man."
A what?
Like Jason Kenny.
Oh, okay,
like,
yeah.
A Kenny man is not a real man. I'm like, wow, like you guys are like totally on the woke left, like not getting into the gender stereotypes and all this kind of stuff, and you're calling out someone's manhood because of his political affiliation,
right?
And they don't see it.
Yeah.
Like they're up here. They feel like they're on the side of God.
Yeah. 100%, man. 100%.
It's whacked.
Oh, it's incredible. Well, yeah, and that headspace is dangerous. Like, I had this guy on my Instagram. He's somebody I knew years ago, and he's a gay guy who was friends with a girl I used to go out with. And I remember this time we were like, because we would just kind of like, the three of us would hang out sometimes, and then it came to light that he was actually not a good guy. We kind of cut the tie or whatever. But I remember my girlfriend was trying to embarrass me, and she was telling the story about how
homophobe.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. But this might be just, if you got any kids listening, just cover their ears for a second. I remember my girlfriend was trying to embarrass me, and she told him like the story about how she tried to just stick her finger in my butt. So this guy's coming after me on Instagram because, fast forward like 6 years, he's coming after me on Instagram because I go around with that Chris Elston, the kids can't consent to puberty blockers guy, and he goes, for someone who likes it in the butt, you sure have a big problem with LGBT. And I'm just like, no, I just don't think we should sterilize children. And also, why are you like trying to shame me? You know what I mean? Like this weird, like, I don't use these words, but like you'd call that like homophobic. I don't know what you'd call that.
Really attracted to you.
Yeah, must be. Well, who's not? Who wouldn't be? But
yeah.
But do you know what I mean? Though it's like you're using like a shaming tactic in reverse. It's just so weird. These people, but they feel virtuous. They feel like it's okay, and they think that someone like me will have shame when I'm just like a human being.
Yeah, and the divisiveness is what's actually the problem, and they know. It's like the professional sports thing again. They know divisiveness and arguing is what sells, and fear sells, and so you know, like as a libertarian, well, as a human being, I don't care who you have sex with.
Right.
I don't care what your relationship status is. I don't care if you're in a throuple or I don't know what the quintuple or
Right.
or you like you don't have a relationship. I don't care what pronoun you use. I don't care about any of that unless you're harming someone, and that's where it comes down to the children.
Mm-hmm.
Children aren't capable of making that choice for themselves, and it can harm them. And I will say, like, I actually talked to one of the coworkers in my space. I brought this up when I was saying I was going to go to Vancouver for a Libertarian function, and he said his dad is trans.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, interesting. Like, tell me about that.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he knew when he was 4.
Whoa.
She actually said she,
Right.
And that's fine. And I don't dispute that does happen once in a while. I think it's just very, very rare. The problem is when you get to kids, they're very, very, they're unfortunately very malleable. They're very, someone will say, hey, this worked for me. I took the hormone therapy and then everything was okay. Oh, I'm going to do that too. I wish kids were smarter than that, and I wish that we weren't warehousing them in the schools all the time, and we actually had time to communicate with them on a deeper level. But that's the fear, right? And so again, I don't dispute that there is that very, very small percentage of people, but they don't need it when they're kids either. Like life's long. Wait until you're a bit older.
100%, man, 100%. And it's a tough conversation to have with anyone because inevitably the suicide thing comes up. But what I can't get my mind off is that we think China is so barbaric for sterilizing women to keep the population down and stuff like that. But then we're sterilizing the kids in the name of virtue. And these drugs like Lupron was designed to chemically castrate sex offenders, and they're giving it to these kids. And Chris was telling me that there's a really common thing now where there'll be, I forget what he called it, I think he called it a hotspot or something, where there'll be like, within a week, 5 to 10 girls will come out as transgender. And these are 3rd grade, 2nd grade, that kind of thing. And I refuse to believe that they would have been trans otherwise. You know what I mean? I just, I can't see it.
Yeah, and then when you go to a doctor in BC who has 500 clients in the foster home system with who's advocating for them,
right?
And again, as as libertarian, I don't care. Like, I understand that there's all sorts of different people in the world, but what we have to do is protect our children. Yeah. And especially the most vulnerable children who don't have someone speaking up for them. Yeah. And they don't know. Like, personally, I had a very serious depression, anxiety disorder most of my life from childhood abuse. And it took me a hell of a long time to get over that. And I would have done anything to make that go away. Right? And so if there's trauma with some of these children, they'll choose anything to make that go away. And if somebody in a position of authority says, oh, well, let's give you this hormone therapy and you're going to be okay. And the thing is, they might actually be okay for a short period of time, and this doctor's like, yeah, I did a good job, pat myself on the back. But if you haven't dealt with the root trauma, and nobody's tracking the suicides that happen on the other side of this thing when they're like, damn, I chopped my breasts off. Yeah. And like, it's there was one government official who said that detransitioners are a myth. You know what I mean? Yeah. But like, you can't tell me that there's nobody who regrets that decision. But what I find interesting, because I didn't think that there was a libertarian argument against the blockers for the kids. But I think what I'm starting to recognize more and more is that while libertarians believe that we don't need government at all, generally, right? That doesn't mean that a libertarian government wouldn't do anything. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what I'm trying to wrap my head around, is what would a libertarian in power actually look like? What would they do other than slashing regulation? Yeah, and I think a libertarian government is different than a libertarian philosophy. I'm not saying that we don't follow a libertarian philosophy. Actually, I think, in essence, that we do. But I remember actually driving out here reminded me during the election when we first met, and a friend of yours like, oh, you gotta meet Mitch. He's very excited about politics. Shout out to Andrew. Yeah, and you invited me. You're like, hey, come up and come to the fire pit with my friends, and you didn't think I would come, and I'm like, yeah, what the heck? Like,
yeah, that was awesome.
and it was great. But I remember like your friends were attacking libertarianism like right down to the root. And like, what's the end game of libertarianism?
Yeah.
Right? And at the time, I was still learning. Like, I've been a libertarian my whole life. I just didn't know there was a name for it.
Yeah, Corona.
And and I remember them challenging me on this, and it made me think. We don't challenge any other ideology, right? Like, what's the end game of conservatism?
Right.
What's the end game of socialism?
That's a great point, man. That's
Like
a very good point.
It's a bad state, and we're not ever going to get into a society where one ideology is for everybody, and we shouldn't. If we do, that ideology is wrong,
Right.
and very, very wrong. And but on the flip side, if you bring libertarian ideals down to its root, that we can think for ourselves, we're free-thinking people, and we can do better than authority. It actually kind of resonates with almost everybody, but they will attack, and they're like, "Wow, that means you don't like social programs."
Right.
That's actually not true. When my businesses are doing well, I donate to. I don't usually donate to sports because those are kind of overfunded. I donate to arts. Music is really inaccessible to a lot of people, and I donate to that.
Cool.
That's fine. And there's I had actually a good conversation at the Freedom Rally. I ramble a bit. I'm probably not making complete coherent sense, but we're all selfish.
Yeah.
Human beings are selfish. Most people don't admit that. They're like, no, I'm virtuous and I'm thinking about other people first. And I remember actually after a couple of years after my divorce, when I was trying to figure out myself and figure out getting out of some of this indoctrination stuff, I realized, actually I was writing on my whiteboard. I was like, okay, and I was reading this book. It said, well, what's your hierarchy? Like, what's most important to you? And I put at the top my kids are most important to me. These are my kids. It's most important. And then I started going down from that, and then I realized, no, actually they're not. I'm most important. And you can be selfish for yourself. And so if I'm selfish for myself, if I'm happy, if I'm healthy, I'm a better dad. Right. I'm a better community builder. I'm a better business owner. I'm a better employer. But if I put somebody else first, it's just a recipe for disaster. And we have to accept that as human beings, we are selfish. But my community building and what I do in the community, and I do a lot. It's a little bit hard in the COVID times because you're not allowed to gather with people, but I still try. I do that because that makes the community I live in better, which is better for my kids, which is better for me. Right. And so you can be selfish for yourself while still loving a society. And there's left-wing libertarians, and that's fine. We can have all these social programs. We just don't need to forcibly tax people and take their money like the mafia.
Yeah, exactly like the mafia.
And have no say in it. Like, we can do better.
I think so, man. I think so. And once people's eyes get open to what a monopoly on force is, I think that's a big thing, because there's an invisible gun to your head every step of the way. Like, people feel virtuous because we're the $400 million going to build a sock factory in Syria or whatever. But that feels virtuous, that we have all this foreign aid and we have all this stuff. But there's just an invisible gun in the room. There's a gun in the room, and they take that money from you, and you don't see the gun because it just comes right off your check. You don't notice it. But I'm convinced that if taxes never existed and they implemented the tax policy we have today overnight, people would. I don't know. I don't want to get pulled. I'll get pulled off YouTube if I say what they would do. But
I don't know if you watched my video. So the finance minister did an event with the Kelowna Chamber of Commerce. So okay. I jumped on that, and I asked a pretty harsh question, and I made her stammer.
Nice work.
The question I asked was, so like as an entrepreneur, like I went from 30 employees and contractors last January to 6 by the middle of last year. Like and every time you let someone go, well, actually sometimes it's good, but like it's heartbreaking, right? Like this is someone that chose to work for you and relied on you and was part of your vision. And I had to lay them off. So I asked her, I was like, has there been accountability in government? Has anybody, like, because the services have been greatly reduced. Like, you know, I love a lot of the city of Penticton, but I feel bad for the person that is sitting at the front desk reception at the swimming pool, who's not allowed to talk to anybody or interact with customers, but she's still being paid a full-time salary. And I'm glad for her that she's getting that salary, because she's probably a great person. But if I was running a business, I would have to lay that person off. And that's probably happening on thousands and thousands of people in the government across the country, hundreds of thousands, probably.
Yeah.
But there's no accountability to that. And then, well, we can't lay them off because it's COVID.
Yeah.
But they're not doing anything. And they're not accountable to money.
Not at all.
Because, we don't have enough money. We can just make more and increase taxes. So, and so I asked her, like, has there been accountability to government? And she stammered for about a minute. Until she got back to her talking points, and then she started saying, oh, well, there's the government workers, and some of them sent me emails at midnight and on the weekend, and they stepped it up, and they created these programs in record time, and they actually worked. You know, like...
Nonsense.
You know.
Total nonsense.
You're a plumber.
Yeah.
You work hard every day.
Yeah. Never ends.
A government worker. Yeah, well, I don't have anything to do today.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to say anything.
Yeah, it's kind of just like a constant validation of why they're there is like their whole job. A lot of these people.
Yeah, and why are they doing what they're doing? And so, you know, back to what you said about a libertarian government, what we would do, and you know, it would act, like people say, well, you're just going to cancel all the programs and you're going to delete tax and delete the government. Well, we can't actually do that, because that would violate the non-aggression principle.
Right.
We believe that you shouldn't harm another human being, and so canceling all the government programs on day one would harm other human beings.
Yeah.
And so a libertarian government would go in, and we'd learn and we'd understand, and we'd start to chip away at the stuff that doesn't make sense.
Right, trim the fat, right?
Yeah. And like for me, and similar to what I did with the Okanagan School of the Arts, is if you're in a position where you need to gain power and control because of corruption, you get that power, you clean it up, and then you distribute that power.
Right.
And that's what a libertarian government would do. They get in the government, they would start dismantling things safely. Should the government be doing this? If not, don't do it. And obviously they should be doing pretty much nothing.
Yep.
But you can't do that overnight, and do it a little bit at a time, and you start to empower people, allow people to think for themselves, and over a period of time, they would say, why do we have the government anyway?
Exactly. That's the inevitable question, I think.
And yeah, and it's so much complaining. Like a municipal example, I remember I was out on my street one day, and the snowplow came by and threw a bunch of snow in my driveway, and my neighbor got all mad, and then she's like, look at that sign, like how much did that sign cost? And I was like, well, here's the thing, like we live in Penticton, we get a snow event almost never.
Right.
And you know, you can buy the snow machines that Ottawa has that eats the snow and chops it up and carts it away, but it's going to cost like 35 times more. I don't know.
It's a mess, man. Corona. There's another avenue that I've actually never asked you about, because I think it's also like a relatively new thing to me, this new involvement that I have, because I'm doing everything I can to liberate Canada in like whatever avenue possible. 100%.
Yeah.
And
you're doing an amazing job. To all his fans, Mitch is absolutely amazing.
Thanks, Keith.
They know that.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. And so through that search, I, for myself, have come to the conclusion that the best move is to put libertarians in office. But this PPC thing that's coming. It's good. I'd be happy if Maxime was our prime minister. Not my first choice, but he's not a lizard like these other people. He's something else. But through all this, this whole journey, I've also gotten saved. Like, I found Jesus in my life, and gotten involved with the Harvest and the Battle for Canada and stuff like that. And something I've been learning a bit more about is the Christianity side of our politics. You know what I mean? And like Leslyn Lewis, people like that. I'm starting to get more familiar with that side of things. And my concern with not my concern, but I think the reason that the church can't necessarily get behind the libertarians is because they're not open-minded. And I am finding, because I used to be very liberal. I used to be like a alcoholic, very liberal with all types of indulgences. And for my own personal life, I've just found by cutting out this stuff and just trying to keep it on the straight and narrow, that's what works best for me. But my takeaway from it is that like people need to have the freedom to come to that conclusion themselves.
Yes.
But what do you say to these diehard? Because a lot of these are conservative Christian people that they want God first, and so in their mind there has to be a God-fearing leader, and there has to be religious thought put into our the bills that are coming out and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, what do you say to? I don't want to say the religious right, because that's such a
I see where you're coming from, and so I really do see both sides, and actually I appreciated what was the pastor's name that talked to Art today. I appreciated that he had a balanced approach to what he was saying, and of course he's going to bring the God aspect into it. And what I think a lot of the the Christianity and that sort of a thing is it is bringing it back down to your innate human rights. Right. And so we've been given these rights. They choose to label that with the name God. I choose to label that with the name of the universe.
Sure.
We exist, and here we are. And so where I struggle a little bit with some of the religious organizations, and my friend that emailed me he's a staunch Christian, and he's like, libertarians are evil, and
okay,
nice, that sort of a thing. Where I struggle a little bit is where it gets into the indoctrination side of things, right? Sure. And so I went to Catholic school until about grade 8. It's where I learned that I was fairly, if I look back, I've always been anti-authority. I remember rejecting religion class, and again, I'm not rejecting somebody's faith. Like, what you believe is your own thing, and the community aspect of church is really, really key. What Art said about how much money it saves the government by what church does, and to me, the community aspect of church is the most important aspect of it. And if and again, you guys are gonna get mad at me, but the marketing of that is God and Christ and religion. Right. I'm okay with that if it brings that back into the community. But when it becomes corrupt, that's when there's a problem. When it becomes you're taking too much money from people, when you're tricking people into doing things that they wouldn't normally do. And to me, growing up in the Catholic school system was very damaging. Like, this imagination of there's this deity looking over my shoulder, and he's like, is he doing the right thing? And if you don't do enough good things, then you're going to go to hell. And
the shame too, right?
And like, is he, I'm in my mid 40s, is he like looking at me, looking at the Sears catalog bra pictures? Is he judging me for that? And that's a very damaging thing, and I think it comes from a very genuine place. But for me to kind of get out of that indoctrination portion of it, and to realize that what it is trying to encourage humanity to do good things and be good people. I look at a very libertarian philosophy of we actually all want to do good things. We don't have to be coerced into it. And again, I'm not painting every religious organization that way, but there are a significant number of them that will use those coercion techniques. And like your friend Art, and I think he's very genuine, and he really wants to help humanity. And you could flip that argument back onto a politician, which I don't like to call myself.
Right.
Politician.
But you are now.
Yeah, but politicians are disingenuous, and they're going to market and manipulate people into their philosophy. Mm-hmm. And I think what it is, whether it's religion or my software company, as an employer, as a parent, all these kinds of things, if your goal and your true goal is to help people empower themselves
Mm-hmm.
to think for themselves, whatever the mechanism is for it, I'm for that.
Yeah, I hear that. And I don't have really much problem with anything that you said, because I was pretty damaged by the church as a kid, as well, and just had a deep resentment for all of it. Corona, and then just as I've gotten older,
I feel like I'm gonna die. Coughing.
I'm just a smoker, all right. I'm just a smoker.
I got acid reflux. I cough sometimes too.
Yeah, you gotta be careful nowadays. But yeah, and then I ended up going back in a very different way, and still hold a lot of resentment for these non-essential churches that are more than happy to open up for the experimental jabs that aren't CDC or FDA approved, but they won't open up for worship or any of this other stuff. But if you're not essential, stay closed, as far as I'm concerned. But
I think it is like anything in the world, and so I'll bring it back to my business a little bit. Like in software, I'm a small agile company, and we do better things than the big companies do. Whereas the IBMs and the Deloittes and all these guys, they cost a lot of money, and they don't really do good things. And there's corrupt people everywhere, whatever the industry. So there's corrupt people in religion. There's corrupt people in politics. There's corrupt people in software. There's corrupt lawyers. There's also really good lawyers. I can't believe I'm saying that. No, there's really good lawyers. There's really good software developers. There's really good politicians.
yeah,
And I hate that word though. Like if people call me a politician,
it's derogatory, hey?
Oh, I'm quitting. Because we don't need politicians in the government. We need real people in the government.
Well, that's a big part of like what I'm on right now, is that I don't think this is ever gonna let up, and whether it's in my lifetime or the next, they're gonna clamp down so hard that there'll be a populist uprising at one point or another. And right now I'm seeing a lot of the freedom movement go to the PPC, which again is like fine, like they're good, but I do view it as just a better authoritarian, like in my mind. And so I wonder, like, are they just gonna, like, when it happens, because I do think it'll happen, like, are they just gonna go that route and then settle? You know what I mean? But like, if I just think that because the other big side of it is that we could get an actual deadly pandemic eventually. You know what I mean? Yeah. And pretty much every argument I've heard from Derek Sloan and Maxime Bernier and these guys is that we don't need vaccine passports because the science isn't there. The science doesn't back it up. But if the science backed it up, we still should be free. We should still have the charter. And the libertarians are the only ones that have that as a principle, that we should be free no matter what, because authoritarianism is not the answer. It just it never should be the answer.
Yeah, I think we have to stick to our principles no matter the cause. And I like what Tim Moen, the leader of the Canadian Federal Party, says. Like, he's like, it could be 100% fatality rate and lockdowns are still wrong.
Right.
And to be honest, if it was a serious disease, we could all stay home. Like, I don't like to get sick.
Right.
I don't want to die. If it was serious enough, we would just do that. And yeah, like it's very interesting to watch, right? Like Maxime Bernier almost became leader of the Conservative Party of Canada.
It was 49%, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and then they went with ultra-Christian family guy, Andrew Scheer, that they thought was going to have the dimples to win the election.
I can't stand that guy, man. He's the worst.
Oh, yeah. When I met him, I remember thinking he's taller than I thought. When I met Horgan, I actually it was actually within the same week. I remember thinking he's more arrogant than I thought, and I already thought he was really arrogant. Here's a fun Horgan story.
Let's hear it.
So, actually, I got two. So he, and I don't like negative politics, but we're in desperate times here. So I was running this thing called the Smart Cities Challenge in Penticton, and it was a big community event, and the whole point of it was the community could drive things and the government would listen, and that's why I liked it. And I was carrying this like giant blue number 10 around.
Okay.
It was giant, like it was like this big. And so John Horgan was in town. I'm like, I guess I got to go to an NDP event because it's for the community.
Sure.
And I meet him, and I was like, hey, Mr. Horgan, like here I'm doing this event, and I got this thing, like, can we take a picture with this giant number 10 at the end? And he didn't bother to even consider or think about why I was asking for it. All he did was he's like, only if I can hold the number 1. I'm like, oh, okay, fine, who holds the 0? And he pointed to his executive assistant who runs his life, and he says, he's the 0.
Really?
I'm like, holy shit, man.
Oh, gross, man. So typical, though. What a typical politician. So gross, man.
Arrogant, bullying son of a bitch. And then my other story, I was at the Tech Summit, and he was up front, and he tried to make a Star Wars joke.
Okay. How'd it go?
He tried, where Obi-Wan says, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And he said some statement like that, but he said it like, these aren't the droids you're looking for. And of course all the nerds in the audience are like,
cringe.
dude.
The collective cringe. Oh, that's awful, man. That's awful. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Well, and do you know who John Horgan's chief of staff is?
You told me. Okay, who is it? I saw you post something about that, or you mentioned it.
Yeah, his last name is Meggs, Meggs. I forget his first name, but he was an active member of the Communist Party of Canada for, I think, over a decade.
Well, he's in good company now, hey.
And the chief of staff is the person running the show. Mm-hmm. And we got to be careful with some of these words, right? Like you throw on communist, fascist. Mm-hmm. Libertarian, left wing, right wing, right? Like it puts these kind of labels in. But that is a real communist who is in a position of power in our provincial government. Right. And the other thing that Horgan said at that event that I was at, like he was talking about where him and Rachel Notley, they were in their think tanks and they were coming up with these plans and schemes, and he's like, oh, it's finally coming to fruition, and our socialist agenda is going to win. Really?
Did he use the word socialist agenda?
I'm a feeling kind of guy. Like, I'm not going to say 100% that's the words he used, but it just struck me like, wow. But you take that on the conservative side of things too, and I've seen Stephen Harper talk too, and he's the conservative agenda, and that's where I'd like to get with politics, is to get out of this agenda-based thing, mm-hmm. and get back to what government is actually for. And in my mind, the only function of government should be to preserve our individual liberties.
Sure.
They don't need to be our parent.
Mm-hmm. Man, that is like a very powerful message. I might clip out you just saying that and just blast that all over, like, hey, he's running for office. Because that's like this thing is, and I think it comes back to the monopoly on force, but it's, people have this idea that it's the government's job to keep us safe from a germ, and it's their job to send you money if you have a baby out of wedlock, and it's their job to do all these things, and it just doesn't have to be. And that's again, just to bring it back to the church a little bit, I think, because people go, oh, it'll be anarchy, and in the negative sense, they go, it'll be so bad if we get rid of these programs and stuff, but we have infrastructure in place to help, like the Harvest, where they fund this I can't even remember what you'd call it, but this like this home where basically if there's a group that if they can talk a woman out of having an abortion, they direct her to this clinic, and they will feed, clothe, hug, take care of the babies for up to a certain amount of time, and then send it off to a good home. And they have like these things in place for their agendas, you know what I mean? And also just like they go out and they feed the homeless every week, and there's just so much more that could be done, Because right now, like, that's funding off tithes, right? So that's 10% of people's income that come to the church that do pay that. So imagine if we weren't getting 45% of our income stolen, and then it was a 10% of our income.
Yeah, it's a fallacy that people think that if we don't pay tax and the government doesn't take care of people, that we would leave people behind.
Right.
We're humans. We will take care of people, and we will take care, especially if we bring it down to our community level. We know who the vulnerable people are, and if we defer and say, oh, the government's got that, well, I don't have to think about that. But imagine if, and what would happen, let's use the example of, like, oh, we stopped paying tax right away, and suddenly everyone's got 40% more money, and
right.
I'm going to go buy a bunch of stuff. Before long, you realize, like, there's only so much stuff that we need. Like, right. we're in an abundant time where we don't need as much stuff as we think, and we would take care of it. Like I get attacked a lot because I don't believe in publicly funded healthcare. Right. And so they'll say, "Wow, you want American style healthcare?" No.
Of course not. Nobody wants that.
Yeah. It's completely ridiculous. Nobody wants that. But people can't get past the sacred cow of Canadian healthcare, and they can't think about other ways. Like, imagine if you had direction of your money, right? And there was, and I know it sounds complex, and I'm gonna try to simplify this without going down a rabbit hole. It's kind of like when a lot of us, our parents took care of us when we were young, and they were a buffer. They were our back. Like, they had our back. And actually, I remember my dad, when I was in university, he had a very successful string of farm equipment dealerships.
Okay.
And something went off the rails between him and corporate, and suddenly all of that went away. And my whole life, I had this back of, oh, well, I can screw up, and my dad's got my back.
I see. Okay.
And when that was gone, it was hard. But in the end, it was so much better. And obviously, my parents still do have my back in so many ways. But it's kind of like that buffer and that comfort level of the government, and so many people aren't good at getting out of their comfort zone.
Oh, they hate it.
Yeah. Absolutely hate it. They love being told what to do. They're like, oh, yeah, my life's good. This is what I got to do in my day. At the Freedom Rally, I was talking to a guy about that subject, and he was used to be a construction worker, and I was a hypnotherapist. Okay. And he said, absolutely that. I used to get told what to do every day, and I didn't think. And I went home, and I still didn't think. And then when I ran my own business, I was like, oh, wow, I actually,
got to think.
gotta think.
Right.
And how many people are in that, right? Like, they're just not using their brain because they don't have to. Myself, personally, I've almost been bankrupt as an entrepreneur 4 times. Maybe I'm not a good entrepreneur. I don't know.
No, I think that's common, though. I think most entrepreneurs have a story like that.
And the jury's still out on that. I'm in a good spot now, despite COVID almost destroying a lot of things.
Bonnie.
Yes.
Not COVID.
Yes, Bonnie.
I always try to catch people on that.
St. Henry
Yep.
destroyed. Yeah, I opened a co-working space in West Kelowna last March. And it was part of a plan and growth and community building, and I was like, man, I'm gonna have to bankrupt an 18-year business. I'm gonna lose my kids' RESP. Wow. But this is tough, but you fight back and you do it, and most people don't get out of their comfort zone at all, and they don't. They haven't been taught that. We don't teach that in school. You don't teach that it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Right. And to fail.
Yeah. And actually, I've said this to a bunch of people about your shows, and I don't think you've tried to get me out of my comfort zone hard enough yet. But I appreciate that about the interviews that you do, is that you do kind of like push that envelope a little bit. You stay on the side of reasonableness, but you're like, okay, let's get you a little bit on that other side.
Yeah, well, it's good to push people a little bit, right? Yeah. Especially because, a lot of people are very comfortable, man. A lot of people.
So comfortable.
And that's like one of my main goals for my own life, is to just be never comfortable. Because I've had stages of my life where it's like, you go to work, just like you say, you go to work, you get told what to do, you do it, you come home, you watch a movie, and you go to bed. And it's just like, that's not what the human experience is supposed to be. It's supposed to be insane and like wild and fun. And they're with this agenda. I mean, I go a little bit further into like kind of conspiracy stuff and that kind of thing. But as far it's right in front of us now. Like we don't have to talk about lizard people or anything for me to tell you they're going for a prison planet, because we lived it. We went through it. And social distancing is part of every major party's platform. They all encourage it. But I don't know. I think we're on that socialism distancing now, right? We're trying to.
Well, here's a perspective I'd like to tell to your listeners. We're all in this situation now where all of these different lives matters, and we're all fighting about which lives matter and which lives don't. Mm-hmm. None of our lives matter.
Whoa.
We're on a rock spinning in space around a giant fireball in the middle of nothingness. None of this actually matters. And I don't mean that to be like, oh, none of it matters. I'm going to go like die in a corner.
Right.
None of it matters. So why don't we fucking enjoy it?
Right.
Enjoy it.
Yeah.
None of our lives matter.
And do something, right? Let's do something.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting around, staying home until nobody dies again.
Yeah. Like as humans, we've been an exploration species, and we've done great things. We've done horrible things. Mm-hmm. I look at people challenge me a little bit. I was like, we should be putting more effort into space travel. Mm-hmm. I'd like to hedge my bets. This planet's volatile. It's the only one we got. Right. I'd like to let's see how we can get to another solar system. Mm-hmm. And like, oh wow, yeah, but we got to solve world hunger and poverty and all these things first. And like, do we? Or
right.
we can think of multiple things at once. Of course, this pandemic has caused more world hunger and starvation than anything. Maybe not Stalin, but it's approaching Stalin level.
Right. Well, yeah, man, and I mean, I'm inclined to think that most of the space exploration might be fake. I don't mean to get... Dude, I'm just saying, Elon's car floating in our atmosphere, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying any of that shit. But aside from that, it's just that, like, if it wasn't all the government, because, like, what you're saying is, like, I don't agree. I don't think that we need to be focusing on space travel and that kind of stuff, but... I don't care if like you and all these other entrepreneurs want to do it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, why don't you guys keep your money and you do it instead of stealing my money to do it? And it's the same thing with like all these ways that they're trying to legislate morality in all these different ways. Why don't we just live and let live? Why don't we just all keep our money and everybody can act what they feel passionate about? You know what I mean? To me, it's so simple, like, because it's like you say, all lives matter, Black lives matter, blue lives matter, all these like big wastes of time everywhere you go. I wish we could all just get behind this live and let live thing. Mm-hmm. To me, that's the answer, and we should all like the reason I love this flag so much too is the snake doesn't bite you unless you step on it. Mm-hmm. You know, like the snake isn't inherently dangerous.
Yeah, I say that my software company is Big Bear. Yeah. Software, and I say the same thing about the bear, right? The bear is a very, very docile creature. Right. Bear doesn't want to hurt you, but don't poke the bear.
Don't poke the bear. Mm-hmm. What do you think's gonna happen? Because they're poking the bear, man, and they're starting to affect the construction workers more and more. They're starting to affect a lot more blue collar people, and I'm seeing more. I don't know, more different types of people coming to the rallies and different types of people saying no. What do you think is going to happen? What in the next 365 days? Where do you see this going?
Well, it depends. It depends what we do as people,
Right.
right? Like the government's work on popularity, and yes, there's conspiracy. There is a global thing happening, but most of the politicians are working on popularity, and they won't. Doug Ford's in hiding again while he's trying to rethink what his strategy, so he's going to get his poll numbers back up. Here's the thing: if we as humans, we got enough of us saying, and I know we're all out there, that we're just not. Everybody's too afraid to say because they're going to lose their job and their friends and their family. But if enough of us speak up and say, "Hey, we're done with this,"
Yeah.
they'll be done with it.
It all goes away.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that's a big part of my mission by being crazy rapper guy with the cape and that kind of stuff, is that everybody is so afraid to say anything. It's my hope that by me going to this level that I can shift that Overton window just a bit, and like maybe someone will be encouraged to like bring it up at the table, or maybe they'll be encouraged to go into the gas station for 5 minutes without the mask. You know,
Yeah.
that just shifted a little bit because we're so far in that other way, man. People are so scared, and like you get messages just like me that are like, "Thanks for what you're doing. I'm too afraid to do it."
Yeah, at the Bernie event, a woman came up to me and she's like, "Just thank you so much for what you're saying." And she's a community care nurse. She's got a family. She's like, "I have no voice."
Yeah. Yeah, man.
And I'm not gonna have a voice pretty soon because I drank too much beer.
Well, we'll call
I'm
it.
gonna have to.
We'll call it pretty quick here.
But yeah, just on that too. Like I also have another family member who was afraid of speaking up, and she was very COVID scared at the start, and she did all the right things, but over time she's like, "Yeah, this doesn't make sense." And the first time she posted something even a little bit dissenting, she's like, "I'm gonna lose some friends."
Right.
And it's scary. And why is it so scary to have even a slightly dissenting opinion?
Right.
And that's what we should be worried about. Not the virus, not the mandates, not the government, but the fact that we can't communicate anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really sad thing. That is the vitriol on both sides too. I've seen my friends are guilty of it. I'm guilty of it.
Yeah.
Just like the other side, but we just got to keep trucking along. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Make Canada debate again, and but yeah, man, you've got my vote 100%. I saw you going hard against this stuff, like day one, and I sure appreciate everything that you've done, and I hope we can, because I to me it's without a doubt that you're going to be leader of BC Libertarian Party, but it's my hope we can get some libertarians in.
I appreciate what you've done, and I think you'll be the next leader after me.
You think so?
I think so.
Hope so, man. They're trying to get me to run PPC, but I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm ride or die libertarian, man.
Yeah.
Come here, Keith. Thanks, hey? You want one of those? Come and hug.
Yeah, man. Even though you're coughing, I was at a freedom rally. I think we're probably not going to die.
Yeah, we'll probably be okay. All right, you people, be brave, live free, take your vitamin D, and hug your family. Vote libertarian.